Hello my friends and welcome to episode 10 of the Second Age show, and of course, as we've done with all the other shows so far, it has to be a special episode. And I think from what we released on Friday and prior, I think this is going to be a really interesting video, to say the least. And of course it is a special episode, so we have to match it with a special guest. So we have Ian Nathan here with us, who is the author of Anything You Can Imagine, Peter Jackson and the Making of Middle-earth. Hello my friend.
Hi, good evening. Very pleased to be here.
Indeed, and it's great to have you on, and we'll come back to you in a second. But firstly, joining us, we have the normal co-host, we have Lakhitia. Hello my friend.
Hello, I'm super excited. Let's kick this off.
Indeed. And finally, we have Kyle. Hello, my friend.
Hey, great to be here with you all. This is an exciting one for sure.
And joining us as another special guest, I'm sorry, Chen, I haven't given you as the grand introduction as Ian, but we also have Chen here as well. Hello.
Hi, no need for grand introductions. I'm just here, and as usual, quite pleased to be here.
Indeed. So before we go on, I'm sure everyone at home watching will be like, let's get right into it. But of course, we do have Ian here. So firstly, if you just want to just quickly just give us, maybe tell some of the viewers at home that might not know who you are, just a quick rundown.
Okay. Oh, my whole life story. Okay. My name's Ian Nathan. As you introduced me, I have been a journalist and an author for 30 years now. I worked for a magazine called Empire, which is a huge movie magazine based out of England and London. And it gave me many wonderful opportunities. And foremost amongst those opportunities was the chance to visit the set of Lord of the Rings and get to know Peter Jackson very well, and subsequently visit Lord of the Rings again and again. And I visited The Hobbit, and I came out of my magazine time and started writing books about film. And among them is a book that you introduced earlier about the making of Middle-earth. I'd accumulated so much material and thought I had the stories, and felt there was still something to be offered in terms of telling that story. I know the DVDs are fabulous, and they have this incredible kind of extras that go into such detail. But I felt I could bring to it a movie-making story, a story of a grand journey. So I always pitched my book as not the story of magic rings and swords and elves. It was the story of a group of mad Kiwis who decided to do the impossible and turn Lord of the Rings into what turned out to be 3 fabulous films, including a very, very fine score. So it's been a fabulous thing. And I had a great relationship with Peter Jackson, who honestly is a marvelous guy. And he opened up his archives for me. And I spoke to so many people at Weta Digital and Meta Workshop, all the cast. There is hundreds of voices in my book. It was an absolute labor of love. And it's been great, actually, because it's the 20th anniversary this year.
Yep.
I've sort of been revisiting it all, and all those feelings are welling up again, all the kind of excitement I had. And I miss New Zealand painfully. And I've been watching the films again in 4K and reliving it all, because I think, like for a lot of people, it just became part of my life.
And and I think also the 4K, I think there's another edition coming out, isn't there? Off the top of my head, I think they're doing a re-release of I think
next month,
next month.
Yeah, it's Ultimate Edition. Though I don't think it has, because there is some footage they've not ever put on anything. Partly because it's incomplete. It's got wrong costumes in it. It's stuff that didn't work out. But there's this kind of fabled footage. There's Aragorn in Lothlorien as a young man. There is stuff of Arwen at Helm's Deep. There's bits and pieces that don't narratively marry up, probably. There's a battle with the orcs at the edge of Lothlorien where the Fellowship first make their way in that never got used. So there are little bits and pieces people have never seen, but I don't believe they're in the Ultimate Edition. Maybe someday we will see them.
Indeed.
5 years. I'll give 5 years.
Yeah, 25th anniversary sounds good.
25th.
So just, and also as Ian mentioned, he mentioned his book as well, so I'll leave a link to that in the description below if you want to go and check that out. I highly recommend it. So I think that's the rundown. So I think everyone watching, just wants to get right into this. So yes, today we're going to be revealing the composers for the Lord of the Rings on Prime. And I know up to this video I have said composer in singular, but as you can see on screen right now, we're going to be looking at 2 different composers. So we're going to spend the first time looking at one, then we're going to spend the second looking at the other, and then we're just going to discuss what this means. This is where Ian comes into play, and everyone else. How is this the right decision by Amazon? Will the fans like this? How will it work out? So yeah, we've got a lot to discuss in today's video. So I think the best way to do is let's go right into it. So first one is we have, and I'd like to reiterate again, of course, we can never say anything is confirmed or something like that unless Amazon confirms it themselves. So at this point, we're just going to have to leave it at rumor, but strong rumor, of course, because as I have said multiple times, I wouldn't release anything that I would think that would like lower that 100% thing that like a reputation thing that I have right now. And if it would damage that, any possibility of that happening, I would normally not release it. So yeah, but this is pretty confident that this is, but of course not confirmed. But now I think let's get right into it. So the first and potentially main composer for the Lord of the Rings on Prime is Mccreary. So this is the first out of the 2 composers, and some of you may have heard of him before, some of you may not have heard of him before. So in either way, we're going to be going over him for the next few minutes just to familiarize his work, because he has got, let's say, a wide variety of interesting material. So I'm quickly just going to run this down, and then I'll take it over to the panelists. So Mccreary, he has done recently actually Godzilla King of Monsters, the most recent Godzilla movie. He has done 10 Cloverfield Lane. He has done actually some of his best work is apparently on The Walking Dead and Outlander, another fantasy series as well, which in the UK is on Amazon Prime. And he has also done work on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But I think the main place that we're going to go to in a bit is maybe the games he's worked on. Some of that is God of War, Assassin's Creed, some bits on League of Legends, and God of War Ragnarok is his next upcoming game in 2022. So yeah, he has done a fair few bit of things. So firstly, of course, I'll put this on to you, Ian. Just initial opinions and reactions is, do you think, what has Amazon decided to go by going through the route of having Mccreary as the first composer for this show?
I think the choice seems very businesslike. It seems like they've got someone in who knows the territory of serial television, who clearly has a background in fantasy, but also a variety of things that probably make him very flexible. There are different requirements for a television show as there are for a movie. Even 3 movies as long as Lord of the Rings was, television has sort of incidental pieces and much more variety than perhaps a film does. And so there's probably almost like a production line process that Bear has to sort of get involved in. And he's clearly so experienced in television. If you look at Outlander, Black Sails, bits of Battlestar Galactica, where he began, you can see that it's a good choice. It's safe hands, I suppose you would call it. It's not a choice that perhaps would make us all stand up and pay attention and go, "Oh my word!" Never saw that coming. But it is someone. I think you mentioned the Ragnarok and God of War scores. The Outlander scores are very Celtic. Black Sails has a sort of thunderous, piratical theme. You can hear music that you think, yeah, I understand. That could, in certain ways, lend itself to Middle Earth. So, yes, I think it sounds like a very professional choice, but not a startling one.
And I think as we go on later on, we might be able to put that into more context and discuss that further with the second choice of composer. So yeah, I think that there's some really interesting points with the fact that he has worked on a lot of stuff, and for example, there's a wide variety. You've got games, we have got the movies, as movies like Godzilla, the most recent one, but maybe this, it does seem like Amazon have gone for someone who they know is quite used to at this point to the realm of television, especially with Outlander as well. I think that's the closest to television wise, close to fantasy we could get, like in the realm of Tolkien, possibly out of everything else. So yeah, indeed, thank you. And Chen, what are your initial opinions on this as well?
I'm not hugely, I have to confess, familiar with Bear's work. Primarily, possibly because it's mostly television, but and computer games, I suppose. I have heard his recent Godzilla score, which it's a fine score, and perhaps more importantly, it's a score that uses material that has been laid down by other composers in that franchise, and does so relatively well. So in that sense, of a composer who is both willing and capable of shaping another composer's material, it's a sound choice. And as has been pointed out before, he's fairly experienced, knows the craft, knows the demands of television, so it works, I think. Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Lakhitia, do you think going on to that, it seems like it's the safe choice from Amazon they've made so far?
Yeah, I think it is. And well, I'm certainly more enthusiastic than my predecessors. I think this is an absolutely fantastic news. I mean, this is an Emmy-winning composer. He's currently in really high demand. So I mostly know him from Outlander, which I think he's done a fabulous job with. So what he did was he adapted a Scottish folk song, Skyboat Song, into the theme song for the show. And as the story progressed and moved around the 18th century Europe and America, so has the title music adapted to incorporate motifs and instruments from the places that the story has visited. So I think that was really inventive, and I think it was beautifully done. So I really like that. And I would say that I think he has had quite a lot of experiences with fantasy and sci-fi, like
Yeah.
he's written music for franchises like God of War, Star Wars as well for one of the video games. And now he's got another epic behemoth coming up, The Foundation. So I'd say I trust his credentials. And plus, he seems to be really passionate about the Lord of the Rings. So apparently, he's got the whole Lord of the Rings extended edition marathon under his belt.
I'll put that tweet on screen. Yeah.
So I'd say, I don't know, I'd say this is a good sign. So I'm excited about this pick.
And Kyle, I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but it's off the top of my head right now, I've forgotten. Do you remember the composer that originally expressed interest into doing the show that I think was another video game composer, but then I think due to some,
Jeremy Soule?
Yeah, Jeremy Soule, yeah, for some, I think in potential incidents, he was, of course, ruled out. But do you think, even if it's because it seems like with Bear Mccreary and Jeremy Soule, if it was going to be potentially him, because he did express interest, do you think Amazon are still going with a similar route with Mccreary?
Yeah, I think I agree with basically everything that's been said so far, and it certainly seems like right now Bear's quite well sought after, and he kind of seems like a go-to guy for sci-fi and fantasy right now, which is cool. And like Lakhitia had mentioned, from what I've seen on his social media, at least, he seems very passionate, which is exciting. And yeah, I'm personally very much looking forward to seeing Foundation. So we'll see how that goes.
So yeah, it does really seem like in the television game right now, he really is. It does seem like he is in demand in that sense. But still, while being in demand there, he still has a considerable amount of things on his CV right now. But at the same time, it does seem like Amazon have gone for someone that they know will be secure. But moving on to the second composer for Amazon's The Lord of the Rings on Prime is Howard Shore. Howard Shore returns to Middle-earth, and this time fully to the Second Age. So yes, I'm sure this announcement will make a lot of people happy right now. I remember just the top of the comment section when the first trailer video came out for the Amazon show around who's is the meet the crew to Lord of the Rings on Prime, and the top comment was Howard Shore needs to be in this, and that got the most likes. And it seems like right now in the fandom, the number one thing people want from this show is Howard Shore's involvement. So I'm sure this is a really, really big news. So Ian, I'll pass this over to you as a person who has interviewed Shore himself. What is just the initial reactions to this again?
Well, it's good news. It's very exciting. It poses lots of interesting thoughts straight away. The first one, is the question I think everyone's been debating over the whole of the Amazon series: is does it connect directly to Lord of the Rings, the Peter Jackson version of Middle Earth? Are they proposing this to be the same universe, or is it not? And you would think using Howard Shore was a definite signal that they were saying, yes, beyond just shooting in New Zealand, we are connecting the dots. We are thematically and stylistically and literally saying this is going to be the world before we get to Gandalf and Frodo and the films we've seen. So that is my immediate, oh yes, that starts to get me very excited. Then you start to think about, well, what will the music be like, and how much of Howard Shore's music will reflect his themes. I mean, he wrote an extraordinary amount of themes and motifs that we use throughout the Rings films and obviously the Hobbit films, and references. It's an incredibly complex piece of music that was sort of referencing itself in different ways, and it's an opera basically that he composed that was sort of laid over the Lord of the Rings. And I start to wonder whether there will be motifs and themes that will be subtly injected into the Amazon series that will recall it, whether we're very conscious of it or not. That he'll use his work. He won't just be the Howard Shore style. It would almost be Howard Shore going back to his toolbox that sort of got Middle Earth written on it, opening it up and going, right, I'll bring out dragon themes. I'll bring out elven themes, especially. And, there's a Galadriel piece of music. Well, he used a version of that for the younger Galadriel we expect to see. So that's fascinating. I suppose a slightly more movie business kind of head on me says, well, is this about the fact that actually what they're doing is akin to what was done with the later Harry Potter films, where John Williams wasn't involved, but they carried on using the themes which he wrote. So they had to kind of reference him as a co-composer. Is literally what Howard Shore's going to be doing, is just being named as the composer of the original music, and they're taking some of the original music and getting Bear to rework it and put it into the new film. Maybe that's what's going on here. I don't know. As you say, this is totally new to me as it's introduced. It's a fantastic choice. There's something, it's the last thing I'll say, something very synonymous with the music that we hear and the visuals that we see that made Lord of the Rings work. So when you listen to the soundtrack of Fellowship of the Ring or whatever piece of music you want to listen to, it brings that world straight back into your mind. Howard Shore went on this quest, his own personal quest. He wanted to write the music that would match the world that these guys were creating. And it's in its own right, it was an extraordinary achievement. And to have that, a taste of that again, just is a fabulous thing. I think that will put us all straight back in Middle Earth within a heartbeat.
And I think you have really well, incredibly put together. I think what a lot of us are, of course, feeling and thinking at the same time. And I like that you did mention that point around, is he potentially just listed as so they can use his themes? For example, then Mccreary's doing the whole thing, and of course nothing can be confirmed, but that is still a possibility. But from of course the means and ways we found out, it does seem highly unlikely that is just solely the case, but never rule it out, of course, because Chen, moving on to you, could you see that let's discuss a possibility that is just Mccreary, and then
the idea of themes by credit, which like John Williams has on Harry Potter and Star Wars films that he wasn't actually on. Based on what we've seen, I don't think that's the case. So I think there is some involvement beyond just an obligatory credit, as far as we can tell. Even if it is the case, if Howard Shore's existing themes are used. As Ian had said very, very correctly, the kind of catalog of themes that Howard Shore has accrued is enormous. I think it's about Doug Adams' book on the music of The Hobbit with its list of themes hasn't come out yet, but I think it ought to be around 160 different leitmotifs. So basically, almost everything has a theme. So yes, Galadriel has a theme that would be totally appropriate for the young Galadriel. Rivendell has a theme. I don't know how appropriate it would be for the younger Elrond, because he's really much, much younger. Essentially, more of a young general than the kind of elder statesman that we meet in the movies, but still. But you get the idea. There's a lot of material that is directly applicable to the setting of the show. So even just as the themes by, it's a big thing. But if it's anything beyond that, then it's ought to be something along the lines of the kind of arrangement that John Williams had for Solo, which was scored by John Powell, but had basically really two themes that were written by John Williams for Powell to use. And it was a very effective collaboration in that regard, very, very effective. And this idea that Shaw could write, a theme for Celebrimbor, the tragic elf who makes the rings, or whatever. Could be very something that marries with the existing themes as well, because it's a very complicated. The themes that they're built out of shared kind of like building blocks. So all the Elvish themes sound kind of like you know that they're Elvish just from the sound of them. And so if Bear was to write a new Elvish theme, it should, in theory, sound as if it's of a piece with the Elven themes that we know. And the same for Dwarven material, certainly the very specific kind of harmony, the use of male voices, same with Mankind, everything really, Sauron. And also the use of instrumentation that Shore has all manner of sometimes really weird instruments, kind of representing these different cultures of Middle-earth. He'll have whistles for the hobbits. Dane gets bagpipes. Gundabad gets didgeridoos. It's just the most unexpected mixture of instruments that you could possibly think of. So the same, making sure that it's, I guess what I'm saying, making sure that it's in the same sound world is a big task in its own. Beyond just the complexities of actually writing material. So it's a very complicated. There are big shoes to fill anyway.
Yeah, I think
enormously huge. Actually, it's like writing a fifth Wagner opera in the ringside or something like that. So it's very.
You had to nudge Wagner in there, didn't you?
It's completely appropriate because I'll tell you why. Beyond just me being an enormous Wagnerian, it's because the model of how the Howard Shore scores are constructed is based directly on Wagner. The use of the leitmotif, the use of orchestral color. It's absolutely, and he ends his Return of the King with a actually wonderful homage to Wagner as well, so it's very appropriate.
And I think you've covered nearly all bases on all the places, but I think the one thing that I think is getting me quite excited is Numenor and how that will play out, and we'll get into that in a second as well.
There's a Numenor theme. There is.
The Gondor theme, the past, and I think we first hear it at the Council of Elrond, and then that continues on.
There is a Gondor. That's the Gondor theme, yes, but there's a kind of variation on it that isn't used in the movie. It's in an alternate take on the prologue, which has kind of, it sounds like the Gondor theme, but it isn't. It's a Numenor.
It makes sense for it to be a slight variation of that,
because it's in the prologue, so it's Numenor.
And Kyle, I think I'm going to give you the exciting question. What do you think is going to be the reaction of all the fandom, the movie fans, the Tolkien fans, everything? Because even when I hear the diehard Tolkien fans, the ones that maybe don't like the movie as much, the thing I always hear again and again is, but damn, Howard Shore's score and the music
Yeah.
was incredible. So how do you think the fandom might react to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people who watch the movies, whether they enjoyed them or not, the soundtrack is kind of its own living, breathing thing, right? And I think a lot of people, whether they, like I said, whether they like the movie or not, that they appreciate the soundtrack for what it is, kind of on its own as its own separate thing. And I couldn't even begin to find the words to describe how this will affect the community going forward. I believe it's the number one thing that the fans want and have asked for, really.
Indeed, and I think that hopefully will resonate to hopefully the reaction to this video and of this announcement. And I think Lakhitia, I'll give you your final says on Shaw quickly as well, because I've got something else to ask you. So yeah, go with them.
I agree with Kyle, and I think I can hear a collective sigh of relief from the fandom here. I think this has been the number one wish from many fans, just to get Howard Shore back. So I agree with all my predecessors. I would love to hear the Elven themes from the trilogy just incorporated into, new Linden and Eregion themes.
Yeah.
And I would equally love to see how Gondor themes could evolve into new Numenorian ones. So for me, count me excited. Like this is great news.
Indeed. And quickly, I was going to ask if you had to give, because what we'll get on to now is I think where Ian will be particularly useful is how will this dynamic work out? What previous examples? I know someone mentioned for Solo earlier as well, but would you give I know Chen has mentioned that there was a little Numenor theme for the prologue, but would you let Mccreary have a fresh taste at Numenor, or let Howard Shore hone in some of his ideals from the past and then they work on it collaboratively? How would you want it to go?
Me, it's interesting. It must be a strange place to be for Bear, because it's like probably the best gig he's ever been offered. Yet he's got this kind of weight he has to carry, which is this Howard Shore, who's probably a great inspiration for him. So that dynamic will be very interesting. How much of the score will Bear be free to write in his own right? How much has he got to follow what Howard Shore dictates? How much is Howard Shore giving to the project, in terms of time and amount of music? Is he a starting place from which Bear then goes out? So it's an interesting, so almost a slight dilemma, I imagine, for Bear. I'm sure he's itching to write his own themes. He would be. The extraordinary array of landscapes and characters that are going to be on offer will open up the universe. We're getting bigger rather than smaller, with this show. So I don't know. Whatever their kind of relationship is will kind of dictate. I know that Howard Shore is a very singular kind of guy, and he, even when he was writing Lord of the Rings, very much in collaboration with Peter Jackson and especially Fran Walsh, he was still a man on his own. He would go off into New Zealand, he would take his notes, he would sample the landscape, he would go back to Canada, he would write. He composed a lot of it on his own, and he was very much an auteur of the opera, of the score that was then married to the images. So I wonder about how much authorship he'll want to hand over to anyone, because this is his great legacy, these scores. Wagner wouldn't hand them off to anybody else, I'm sure. So it's an interesting challenge. I think there's a very practical element, that is, the TV show will require a lot of music to keep it going. It's a lot of hours of music required. And maybe the day-to-day elements of it, Howard Shore doesn't have time for. I'm sure he's in demand elsewhere. He may be an overseer of it. But the relationship between the themes that exist and the themes that will just come because it's Howard Shore's music and what Bear does is an intriguing one. And I'm not 100% sure how it will work.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. That the next question is how's the relationship going to work? Maybe Amazon will clarify that for us, because as I'll reiterate again, all we know is that Shaw and Mccreary are both composers for the show. That's it. and with the extent to that, we're not 100% sure, but I think educated guesses suggest that it'll probably be Mccreary will be working and honing in and all with Shaw providing and then working collaboratively like that. And okay, now I'll give you a quick minute just to go find those. I think quotes about Shaw saying he was interested, but in the meantime,
He was.
I think we know timeline-wise, January, an interview comes out. He says he is not being contacted yet, but he's still interested. Yes. Then Doug Adams recently says he has no clue what's going on, how it sure could be or could not be involved. He's like a sneaky one, I think, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's Doug gives Howard his privacy, and he wouldn't expose anything that Howard wouldn't, be willing to expose himself anyway. So as he said, but it's true. Around January, Howard said that he hadn't been contacted yet. But then the job of a composer is very much, at the end of the pipeline. It's the next to last thing in post-production. And we know that they have a very luxurious post-production. I mean, the show isn't out until basically a year from now. So it's the fact that he hasn't been contacted in January doesn't at all detract from the veracity of what we're saying here. And I think it's worthwhile to bring up Howard's compositional process, which is that he'll write the themes themselves in isolation, which he says usually takes him a couple of months. Now, that's for the movies where he writes an inordinately large number of themes, but if it's 5 or 6 of them for the show, suppose, it would take even less than that. So he can, and he does it, that's another important thing, as opposed to John Williams' compositional process, for example, is he watches a cut of the movie. He usually wouldn't read a script prior to that either. He'll just watch it. Shaw works from scripts. He works from the source material. So he can already be very much at it writing themes before Mccreary has really had a chance to do anything to do with the show. Mm-hmm. So it may well be that when Mccreary shows up to score the show, that whatever groundwork Howard feels that he has to do will have already been done.
Yeah.
So that's my main point. And those compositions, those sketches may include some basic indications towards instrumentation as well, like something, I don't know, whatever, an instrument that he might have in mind. So definitely it could be, he's a very, very thorough person. He'll do a mock-up and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And I think if you have glanced on it a really tiny bit, but if you want to think the extent of what we can continue to reveal around this, I think we are safe to say that Howard Shaw was contacted quite recently. I think that's fine to say. Yeah, we know that he has been contacted in recent months. And Lakhitia, I think another thing that we're going to see from going from movies to a television show is the opening credits. I forgot the whiteout. I just had a complete mind blank, but it's just the opening to a show. That's going to have to be a brand new theme as well? How do you think that would work out? Do you think Shaw would? I'm not sure how they'll probably use Chen or Ian if Shaw has done opening themes to stuff before, like an opening credit scenes where all the the crew actors are all released. Do you think he might be tackling that for this Amazon show as well?
Well, he used to work on Saturday Night Live. He was in the house band on Saturday Night Live, so I think he's used to the kind of pressures of television. Right at the forge, right at the edge of the forge, he's been on TV. I think he's an enormously skilled composer, so I'm sure he can create a piece of music that will fit the unit of the opening credits. You're interested. It's an interesting point you make, though. That's a slightly different requirement than a movie will need. Although a movie has big, often catchy themes, depending on the film. With Game of Thrones, that music was an instant hit. As soon as you heard the music of the opening credits. that you never really heard again, particularly within the show. It had its own purpose, which was kind of to each week to start the show going. So it's a different style slightly. I'm sure Hen will know better than I that that's a different challenge to put before Shaw.
Indeed.
Yeah, it is.
And I was thinking as well, Lakhitia, just in that this is, of course, you had the movies, but now you've got this show. There's so many more cultures to explore. We've got the Guathuran, potentially Dunlendings. We have got, of course, down south to the east. We've got so many new places. Do you think Shaw can, unlike in the movies, have more to expand and make more of these themes that we haven't heard before, in fact?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's done some very impressive opening scenes to the film, so I'm sure, like Ian has said, he'll be all right. He'll know what to do. And of course, Bear Mccreary has a lot of experience in TV as well, so I'm sure between the two of them, they can come up with another tune that will get stuck in our heads for years to come. In still similar vein to Game of Thrones, which has been, like Ian has mentioned, an enormously successful title sequence. So I mean, I don't particularly like that one, so I'm hoping this one will be a bit more, I don't know, a little bit less repetitive, but I'm sure
more of a melody.
Yeah, more of a melody to it, certainly. So I'm looking forward to what they could come up with.
Yeah, indeed. And Kyle, I think from just Shaw's work in general, I'm sure Ian can add on to this later as well. One of the best, well, not the most recognizable thing is the Rivendell theme. When you first, I think in The Hobbit, same in The Lord of the Rings, you first we enter to Rivendell for the first time on that theme, unless someone wants to do a mock-up, just read it just for copyright reasons. If not, that's completely fine. But yeah, do you think, if we are going to see Rivendell in the show, do you think we should should either use that same one as the main body of that score, maybe change it a bit, alternate it a bit, or maybe go for a completely new theme? But I'm not answering my own question, but I think by having Shaw on, what would be the point, etc. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, interesting point about that earlier, and I think a way around that is using some of the same instrumentation, right? Like I believe in that song, there's or that piece of music, there's certainly some harp or something, some kind of.
It's harps, yeah.
Yeah, so using something like that, I think is a way around, kind of, like Hen had mentioned, it's a much younger Elrond, and potentially at the very creation of Imladris itself, right? So, I think to incorporate some of the elements without doing exactly the same thing would be a really cool way to do that.
And just something I think we're all going to be kicking ourselves about is the ring theme. The potentially that's the main. I think potentially one of the biggest themes in the movies. And Ian, do you think? Of course, you spoke to Shaw before and have been into that process of the movies. It was like that. Is that the rhythm? Something like that. Probably the worst mock up you'll ever hear, but just that because in the Second Age, it's the story of how potentially I'll be seeing the story of how the rings were created, how Sauron's ring was made in the fires of Mount Doom. We might be seeing that in the show. So maybe when Sauron has finally created it and he's got it on his finger, we might be hearing that just epic. Just in our ears, it's just so overwhelming. Do you think Amazon do have to use that theme again?
Well, it comes back to the fundamental question. Is this the same universe? Is this the same Middle Earth? Are Amazon committing to that concept, or are they keeping their options open? The very hiring of Howard Shaw really pushes in the direction of this is the same Middle Earth, and they're wanting that because, of course, Amazon and Warner are involved, and HarperCollins are involved, and the estate is involved. So it has every potential to be the same Middle Earth as we saw in Lord of the Rings films. But no one has confirmed that yet. No one has actually said that as a concrete fact. And that's the interesting debate. Can they do it? How can they have it both ways? Can they have Howard Shaw on board to suggest Middle Earth because it's a familiar thing, and still kind of go off in their own direction and not have to be Jackson-like in style or feel. I mean, the very fact that they're now shooting the second series in the UK, away from New Zealand, starts to raise the eyebrows. You start to think, well, is this, is this not a different thing? But I, like you, I want it to be, and I want to hear those themes. And I like you, I can't imagine the creation of the One Ring, especially without Shaw's fabulous piece of music to underpin it, because that it's a really interesting point about what the music did for the original trilogy. Was that a great challenge was set before any adapter of Lord of the Rings, is that the villain just stays out of the action. He's just a flaming eyeball top of a tower. Jackson always said, it's a book without a proper villain. You get Saruman, but you don't have a villain. They had this real challenge about, well, how do you create peril? How do you create this kind of notion of threat that you need, because it's almost an apocalyptic threat? And they did that by making the ring a character. The ring embodied the evil, it's the desire, the lure, all those things. And to make the ring to be able to do that, and it's just a gold band. I mean, they could use the writing and obviously do things with it and have Frodo disappear. But they had to create a character within the ring. And they did that with music and voices. And a lot of that is Howard Shaw's work. He almost is like a special effect that hangs over those ideas and creates thematic links. And that's not just good music to accompany a drama. What that is an extra dimension to the film. That's something that an artist provides. So that's what you're looking for when you have Howard Shaw involved. You're looking for him to elevate these scenes, elevate this creation, and elevate this world by adding this other dimension. And that's my only slight worry, really. The creation of Lord of the Rings was a marriage, but it was a marriage led by Peter Jackson and all these the great collaborators he had, including Howard Shaw. Whereas this Amazon show is more of a not a corporate entity, but it's an executive-driven entity where there are a lot of masters involved, right up to Jeff Bezos. So will it have the opportunity to be as unique and as reverential and as clever, simply because they've got a lot of people to answer to and a lot of money to kind of validate? And the hiring, if it's true, the hiring of Shaw makes me feel more secure, but I still worry because I wanted Peter Jackson to do it.
And I think originally, Hen, if you want to take over from me, I think originally Peter Jackson was asked to do to create the writers' room or something along those lines, but then had
he was in talks. I think. Well, we should ask Ian. I think he spoke to him.
Yes, I can answer this question because I asked him directly. Basically, at the very beginning, as the process of Amazon getting the rights got underway and they were talking to the estate, there was an approach made to Peter Jackson's lawyer about involvement. And he, at that stage, was open to that. He said, I was interested. I don't think he was wholly convinced he wanted to go back to Middle-earth. He'd spent a lot of his career there and had other things he wanted to do. And he's diverse. He didn't want to be just the Middle-earth guy, but he was curious about what Amazon had in mind. The problem arose that he said, if we were going to create this, we would write it. He would have Philippa, Fran, and himself would write the scripts. That's how they work. That's what they did. And he could think of no other way to do it. And they wouldn't do that, and give up approval to Amazon and the estate to have an influence on that. They would write their scripts and they would make the show. And there would be all the toing and froing within that, as there would with any studio. But they weren't going to do this as a committee. And as soon as they said that, Amazon backed off. And Jackson said, I wish them all the best, but we're only going to work that way. He never shut down anything. He never said they can't use Weta. He never said they can't use the studios. All the imagery belonged to Warner Brothers anyway, so he didn't have any say in that. But it was just a working method. Peter Jackson would do it his way, and they didn't want that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's very important. Like, he has to have his creative freedom. He can't have people hanging on his sure. So that's very interesting. I think the question of continuity is really one that has been at least partially answered by the kind of shot that Amazon has released, because it's
Yeah.
very much in the style. Like, I was looking at it and I was recalling like Rivendell and things. So I definitely think there are signs towards it being Peter Jackson like, beyond just necessarily the hiring or potential hiring of Howard Shore.
And I think, and without saying too much more, I think personally, I think we can also confirm that from what we've seen as well.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, yeah, and the ring, it's an interesting point, because you said, well, we'll hear the ring theme when Sauron makes the ring. In my book, you would hear it way before that, which is when he first suggests making rings. That would be a nice ominous thing to add. And that's the thing with themes, that they're not just, they're not just labels, that they can be used in much more clever ways. When Bilbo has some really intense moments with the ring, we'll sometimes hear Gollum material, so as to create a parallel, rather than it being a very literal, I see it, I hear it thing.
Yeah.
It can be much more sophisticated. So that's something to certainly look for in scores such as these. Yeah.
And I think we'll be continuing to have these conversations until, of course, either Amazon confirm, or possibly, and is in the one possibility, deny it as well. But I think this is, we cannot forget about Mccreary as well. He is also involved. He's involved in the show. He's one of the composers who's either working or going to work. Of course, we can't also confirm whether post-production has begun or not. Or not, when we can confirm post-production has begun, but whether the composing process has begun or not.
Oh, that happens very late.
Yeah, very late. And they have like a year or something. Post-production finishes in June or July 2022.
It's usually just a couple of weeks near the end of the schedule. It's very...
And I think we'll move on to this final thoughts as well. And Kyle, I'll start off with you. Mccreary and Shaw, both the two apparently composers working on the Amazon show. What are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think my mind is where everyone else's is. I really wanted Shore to be involved in some capacity, or at least the work that he had done on the films be involved. So at the same time, I want something fresh and new, and I think Bear is a really good complement to that.
And I think we cannot look. Of course, we're always going to have to look down on Bear Mccreary when Howard Shore, some of the level of that is involved, of course. But I think we can put past that. He has done Outlander. He has done, and I think because this show is going to be 8 episodes as well, he has been able to work on that format. And then he's also worked on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. going to Marvel. I think someone mentioned a Disney game as well. Of course, the game scores and soundtracks. I've listened to a few of them. If you haven't, everyone watching, I think I suggest watch that as well. Well, not watch it, listen to that as well. We've got Assassin's Creed, just so many things that he has also worked on as well. And it'll be interesting to see maybe in year and a half time, most likely, the behind the scenes, the post production of how they actually went by it. Because maybe we could say, for example, Howard Shore never leaves Canada, for example, and just stays there, and then Mccreary is doing the groundwork in New Zealand, or Shore could come. We'll just have to wait and see. Also, final thoughts, Lakhitia?
Well, I'm like everybody else. I'm really happy to see Howard Shore back, but I'm also really excited that we'll get to see another composer play around in the soundscape of Middle-earth. And I do think Mccreary is the right man to carry on the legacy. But yeah, I think Howard Shore was the information that everybody really needed to calm their nerves about the upcoming show a bit. So,
do you potentially think that might be a reason why Amazon did choose Howard Shore? Maybe for fan satisfaction, potentially, Lakhitia?
Not particularly for fan satisfaction, but maybe just for continuity, if that's the route they chose in the end.
Yeah, because even if you go to the Production Weekly thing, which is official information, I think production's put down, and I guess there's issues that come out, I think, and one of the parties involved is Warner Brothers as well. So, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And, Chen, I know... we've covered a lot of stuff already, but do you like this choice that Amazon have made?
Yeah, sure. I think it was unrealistic to expect Howard to score an entire TV show. So choosing another composer, using Howard's theme, having Howard probably write a couple of new themes as well. Very sound choice, makes a lot of sense. They have, a fine choice in Bear. So yeah, sure.
And I think for my final thoughts, I think I'm really interested to see how hopefully Shaw tackles Numenor, and I think because that's the unexplored part, and of course we have to create an region theme, and we haven't we only partially talked about the Dwarven theme and how that Khazad-dûm, etc. How
there is a Khazad-dûm theme as it happens.
So. So how we're going to see that, and also. That means we might be seeing Shaw's work in the first stage potentially or prior as well, which is really interesting because of because of the two trees and that was released in Amazon Shaw. So yeah, that's even further things to potentially talk about. But Ian, just wrapping up. Do you think Amazon have handled this correctly? Do you think it made sense to have Shaw come back but then have somebody such as Bear Mccreary to take on this role at the same time and have this as evident partnership? Do you think that's the correct way Amazon have done this?
I think, as Hen said, I think there's a reality about that. I don't think Howard Shaw would want to commit himself to an ongoing television show. I mean, 8 episodes, as you mentioned, for the first season, but they're already planning second season, and obviously beyond that, with the money they're putting into this, that's a big commitment for any composer to give themselves up to. And Howard Shaw, he doesn't just do movie themes and television themes. He does composing outside of that. He's now sort of stretched his remit quite wide. He's a classical musician who has many things he wants to do. So I think Hen's absolutely right. It was unlikely that Howard Shaw would be willing to commit himself so bodily as he did on Lord of the Rings. I mean, the full story of Howard and Lord of the Rings is that he was there the whole way along during production. He was in and out of New Zealand making notes. He had a journey with the production that ended up when he finally started composing the scores. And he traveled all around the world when he actually was doing the composing. He composed stuff in New Zealand, and he composed stuff at Abbey Road, and he composed stuff in Watford. I actually sat on the floor as they did Shelob's Lair and the London Philharmonic all around me. There's me desperately making sure my phone was switched off. But extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And to see him in the moment, and you really get the idea of classical musicians, and he was conducting the Philharmonic, and it's a different thing. You just suddenly think, wow, this is kind of quite high level stuff. He's quite a serious musician. So for me, it's wonderful news that he's involved on any level. But to bring back those extraordinary pieces, I just think it's the third dimension. It's the other element of Middle Earth that you need that will bring it to life. So I'm thrilled.
Indeed, and I think we can all resonate with your final words there as well. We are indeed all thrilled around this news. And earlier on in the week, I did put that tweet out where I think it was Monday or Tuesday, we're either going to make or break the Tolkien community this week. And I think guys, do you think we have gone over the version of we broke it this week? Hopefully with this news, because I think if you asked just a fan of the show, well, not even the show, but a fan of Lord of the Rings, hey, there's this new Amazon show coming out. First things you're gonna ask, Peter Jackson directing it, this and that, etc. Is Elijah Wood coming back? Frodo? No, set in the Second Age. All right. What's the music like? I really like the music from the movies. Is the same composer involved? And now we can hopefully say yes, that is involved, and maybe that will. I'm not sure the extent to that work, but it will make more people hopefully see. I like that. I might tune in for that. But I'm sure Howard Shaw is I think Amazon will have a lot more to bring people in than just Howard Shaw, just the scope of this $1 billion production. But I think it's safe to put it. I think a good quote is "The Return of the King." I think that's a nice fitting way to put it there. So just to cover again, Bear Mccreary and Howard Shaw are apparently the two composers working on the Amazon Lord of the Rings TV series. And we are going to leave it there. And I think it's been a really great in-depth discussion, just talking about so many different possibilities of how Amazon have approached it. That wise, how the continuity theme, I think that's going to be the thing that continues after this video. How does that represent, how is it going to be with the connection as well? And we also have Ian to thank for that as well. So thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Great pleasure. Thank you.
Indeed. And also, likewise, thank you, Chen, for coming on as well. It's been great to have you on.
Yeah, as usual, it's always a great pleasure.
Indeed. And of course, Lakhitia and Kyle, as always, thank you to you guys too.
Hey, thanks. This was a blast.
Always great to chat, and great to meet you, Ian. This was quite lovely, and I'm excited.
Good. Yeah, so am I.
Yeah.
Are we still recording? Am I
Yes,
still
yeah.
in the moment?
Yes, we're still in the moment.
Good.
So,
We're still in the moment. Okay,
yeah.
so I don't say anything untoward. No, we're still on duty.
yeah. So here goes the famous lines. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. But until the next video, my friends, goodbye.